right up there with the Dodgers is the best in the National League, especially if Crow-Armstrong keeps hitting. They're good. I mean, we had a recent survey on ESPN of will anybody win 100 games? And I said no, but I had the Cubs finishing with 99 as the most wins in the majors. So I think they're up there as the best team.
Hello, sports fans, and welcome to the Sportsnaut Interview. Today, we are talking Major League Baseball with David Schoenfield from ESPN, and we are about a third of the way through the season right now, and things are really starting to take shape. Let's get into the conversation right now. I want to start with Detroit Tigers. They're one of the not surprise teams, but one of the feel-good stories in the league, I'll say. I know you wrote a story about them that's up on ESPN, and you kind of detailed their dominance dating back to last season. In fact, it was the last 100 games. They've been really, really good. Now, go ahead and talk to us a little bit about the Tigers and why you believe that they have staying power in this year's Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm a little surprised at this level. I mean, best record over those 100 games. What was it? 67-33, a few games better than the Dodgers. I read last year, those last 7 weeks, I kind of thought it was the fluke. They really rode the bullpen to that run. The offense even wasn't really that great, better than it had been, the first, 4+ months. So I looked at 2025 as like, I don't see a good offensive team. I see a clear ace Cy Young winner in Tarek School, but I thought the bullpen would regress and that would catch up to them. Bullpen's been pretty good, not quite as dominant, but it's they're holding those late inning leads. Skubal, of course, he's been great, but the surprise has been that offense. They're scoring runs. I think fifth in the majors in runs per game, and it's a pretty deep lineup. No superstar hitter, but they're getting production 1 through 9. So I think they're absolutely legit.
Yeah, and you point out in the article that the last time the Tigers won 100 games was in 1984, and that happens to be the last time they won the World Series. So they've got some of that good karma going for them possibly this year as well. Now, over in the National League, it's the Phillies who are the top team, not the Dodgers, not the Mets, although we heard so much about both of those teams in the offseason, and the Phillies are getting it done behind some really good starting pitching. When you look at their rotation, do you think that they have one that's built to last, or could we see some regression?
Yeah, no, it's the real deal. They had the best rotation in the majors last year, and they added Jesus Luzardo, who's in that Cy Young race early, but he's been right up there with Zach Wheeler for a formidable 1-2 punch. Even though Aaron Nola, has struggled, I think he's on the IL right now. Ranger Suarez came back; he's been great the last 3 or 4 starts. Like this little roll, who they just beat, like the Rockies, the White Sox, and I forget who else they played in there. Another bad team, I think. So their offense, it's good. It's not great. Kyle Schwarber's been great. Harper's been pretty good, but it's not great 1 through 9. Not surprised that they're where they're at, of course, but I'm holding back a little bit on the Phillies. I'm not going to hand them that division just yet.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a perfect segue to my next question, because we're going to talk about the New York Mets. Yep. Of course, we heard so much about the Juan Soto signing. That was the big deal of the offseason, but what we're seeing from Soto on the field has been a little less than stellar, I would say. Now, he was 0 for 4 again last night in the game. His average has dropped to, I believe, 224 on the season. And of course, we heard a couple weeks ago during the weekend series versus the Yankees, the rumors of, is he unhappy? Is he just adjusting? So we're all wondering what is going on with Juan Soto based on what you have seen and what you're hearing from around the league. What is wrong with Juan Soto? And do you expect this to continue?
Yeah, I mean, I live in Connecticut, so I watch the Mets more than anybody. And I did my homework here, Evan, and I know when you look at his StatCast page, and you can see all those expected stats, which looks at how hard he's hitting the ball, the launch angles, and so on. And those numbers are great. 294 average, 569 slugging are his expected numbers. Of course, that doesn't matter. It's the real numbers that we look at. I want to go back and check some video to see, is he really hitting into bad luck? Because I watched the Mets, like I said, doesn't seem like he's hitting into bad luck. He's hitting a lot of ground balls, a lot of hard ground balls, but they're not going anywhere, not getting the ball in the air enough, of course, not as many line drives in the gap. So it's hard to know what's going on. As far as everything else, look, it's a big contract. We're all human. We get off to a slow start. I know he got booed last night. That's going to start happening more and more. I think he's fine. He's still hitting the ball hard, 95th percentile hard hit rate. The plate discipline, of course, is elite. So I think he'll be fine. He just needs to get on one of those hot streaks.
Yeah, I agree. I do think there's a little bit of added pressure on him now after signing that large contract. I do think he'll turn it around at some point. Now, storyline number 4. I keep it seems like every time I read an article, it's about Paul Skenes and the possibility that will the Pirates decide to trade him. Now, you can imagine the type of haul that the Pirates would get back in return for a young talent like Paul Skenes. Do you think this is just good fodder for the media, or do you think there's where there's smoke, could be some fire?
No, there's no fire. I mean, the last few Pirates fans that are remaining, they would be jumping off that ship in a split second if they traded him. Look, there's no doubt it's fun to speculate, but I don't think, certainly in recent history, there's ever been a player as good as Skenes with that much service time, right? Still has a full 6 years, I think.
Yeah.
Until he's still under team control. I mean, Juan Soto had 2+ years when the Nationals initially traded him. And that was pretty rare. It's usually your free agent year, maybe a year and a half. David Price was a guy traded with a year and a half to go. No, look, you could argue, there's a rational argument, Evan. I think you would agree that the Pirates should trade him. They're so far away from being a competitive team. You trade him and get 5, 6, 7 prospects. Maybe it could be one of those NBA type trades, right? 7 first-round picks for a star player, something like that. Would the Dodgers love to add Paul Skenes? Of course they would, but I can't see it happening. No way.
Yeah. I don't see it either, but I do think it's something that you should at least entertain. Hear what other teams are willing to offer. You have to hear other teams out. I think that's part of being a good general manager, is to listen to everything. Yep. Now, we discussed the Tigers as being one of the feel-good stories, or maybe even surprise stories, as you mentioned. I think one of the other good surprises in baseball this year is Cubs center fielder Pete Crow-Armstrong, and he's playing phenomenal baseball right now. He's in the early conversation for National League MVP. May not be a household name among baseball fans, but as I said, playing really great right now. What's your take on the young Cubs center fielder?
Yeah, I think he's getting there. I'm certainly seeing a lot of the attention from him, from the media. Baseball card collectors are into him. He's leading National League players in Fangraphs WAR, just barely ahead of Shohei. It's fascinating because I look at that walk rate, 4% walk rate. I don't know if these numbers are sustainable. There's a little bit of that Javier Baez. He swings at everything. But, Baez had, a couple of really good years. He finished second in the MVP one year. So maybe Crow-Armstrong is just that unique player who kind of chases, swings at everything, and can still put up the numbers, because the numbers are there. That's before you factor in his defense, his base running, which are both, as good as it gets. So right now, I don't know if I could vote a guy with a 303 on base as MVP. I might still go Ohtani, but he's worthy to be in that discussion.
Yeah, I think he's in the conversation for sure. Yep. Very well-rounded, kind of a 5-tool guy. Now, speaking of Crow-Armstrong and the Cubs, how about the team in general? After playing just slightly above 500 ball last year, I think they won 83 games. They have the 4th best record in baseball right now. After about a third of the season. Do you think they're a legit contender or more of a pretender?
No, they're legit. I picked them to win the division. I think they were probably the consensus favorite going into the year. Now, a surprise, they've done this without Justin Steele, who's out for the year. The bullpen, still some question marks there. Ryan Presley. I mean, he had that one awful outing where he gave up, 9 runs or something. He's actually been okay otherwise, but he's not striking anybody out. And he was supposed to be their closer at the start of the year. He's kind of lost that job. But yeah, look, they have a pretty good farm system. There's no doubt. I think one of your easiest predictions at the trade deadline, the Cubs will add some pitching, definitely in the bullpen, maybe a starter. They got the resources to do that. The lineup, right up there with the Dodgers is the best in the National League, especially if Crow-Armstrong keeps hitting. They're good. I mean, we had a recent survey on ESPN, will anybody win 100 games? And I said no, but I had the Cubs finishing with 99 as the most wins in the majors. So I think they're up there as the best team.
Yeah. Now speaking of a team who's chasing 100 wins, I got to ask you about the New York Yankees. One of the big offseason additions after losing Juan Soto, they pivoted. They brought in a couple of guys, which has really helped out. But Max Fried was really the centerpiece of all that. He's been phenomenal for the Yankees, especially in the absence of Garrett Cole. What can you tell us about, Fried and the, the season he's off to?
Yeah, he's been great. I know Fried, people kind of in baseball were like, wow, 7 years. That's a lot for a guy who's not necessarily throwing 100 miles an hour. He's had a few bumps and bruises health-wise throughout his career, pretty durable, but a couple, hiccups there. He had Tommy John way back as a minor leaguer. But the consensus was, well, he's going to help the Yankees for at least 3 or 4 years, and they'll worry about the back end when we get there. But nobody expected this, and now he's been great. Carlos Rodon, who first year at the Yankees got hurt, was terrible, better last year, but not where he had been before he signed that big deal. Throughout his first couple starts of the year, he's been lights out lately too. So suddenly you got maybe the best 1-2 punch in the American League rotation wise, right? So, and then some guy named Aaron Judge is pretty good too.
Yeah, and he's chasing 300. He's cooled off, 400. He's cooled off a bit. I think he's down to like 390, 391, but he's given Yankee fans something to must-see TV, I'll say, something to tune into every night, that's for sure. David Schoenfield, everyone from ESPN, thank you so much for your time. Check out all of his work on ESPN. He does a great job. I love reading his articles myself. And David, thank you so much for the time today.
All right, you bet. Thanks a lot.